Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. Psalm 100.
Welcome, everyone. You are listening to A Word Fitly Spoken. I'm Willie Grills here with Zelwyn Heide, and we're here to talk to you about Thanksgiving. Well, this is our annual Thanksgiving episode. Zelwyn, how is the weather on this Thanksgiving week for you?
We are having a white Thanksgiving. We still have snow on the ground, and it is very unlikely that we will not have snow by tomorrow. So we are still dealing with snow, and it is very much winter, and I think it's just going to be one of those things where we just might be in it now. I don't think this is going to melt away anytime soon.
Well, we're in the 60s here in Arkansas, so it's going to be a warm Thanksgiving, but that's okay. You know, you don't get that Puritan feel, though, that I crave this time of the year for this feast day, no pun intended. But yeah, it is warm. We did have a little bit of sleet a few days ago, and I thought of you as I drove in it. I thought Zelwyn would be contented for about 5 minutes.
It's true,
but it was not meant to be. It was not meant to last, so it only lasted a little bit. I don't know when we'll get snow, if ever. They say they get more snow here than they used to, and then others tell me we get less snow than they used to. So I don't know what they're trying to prove. All I know is what the almanac says, and it's been about 80-something% correct for its predictions this year. So. Pretty good track record. But yeah, so warm. Zelwyn, will you gather with family? You traveling over onto the prairie even further this year? What are you doing?
Well, we have our Thanksgiving Day service, which is
Wholesome.
Something that everyone should do. And I'm not going to be shy about saying it, but family will come, but they're not going to come on Thanksgiving. They're going to come the day after. Or so we're going to have a octave of Thanksgiving, I think, is how it's going to end up being for us, which is also wholesome. What about you, Willie?
We're just we're keeping it simple this year, just the family. Actually, my LWML is actually providing a lot of Thanksgiving stuff this year. Very, very good ladies we have here at Zion, so I can say that publicly on the podcast. And they're probably not listening anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's kind of nice, like to have the church ladies kind of swoop in and throw all these like Thanksgiving stuff at you. It's pretty wholesome in and of itself. I feel like one of them 19th century pastors.
You're gonna get paid in chickens or something like that.
Get paid in chicken and oats. Start riding a horse to church every day.
Tell me what is wrong with that picture, though.
I can't find a single thing. The only problem is I can't find my frock coat. It was lost in the moves somewhere. How am I supposed to preach without it?
You'll just have to get yourself a nice duster, Western-style duster, and then that'll just be your frock coat.
I would like to I've seen anecdotal evidence that says that the pastors traveled with their Geneva gowns in their saddlebags, and I suppose that's what they would have had to have done.
Sure.
I mean, you'll have to tell me what you do sometimes.
Just kind of throw it on the back. Just drape it over the horse.
Right. Oh, let's see. So, yeah, it seems kind of odd. I don't even have any cryptid posting, Mothman and Thanksgiving don't go together. We're going to hit all the Word Fitly memes that we can this morning, but Thanksgiving is one of ours. Since we've started the podcast, we've done a Thanksgiving episode every season, right?
Almost every season. Yeah. I think the very first season we didn't do one I don't remember what the reason was. Maybe we just didn't have the opportunity or something. But this, I believe, is like our fourth or fifth Thanksgiving episode. So this is a meme in and of itself to do this episode, which is
well,
good.
It is good to be thankful. We should be thankful that the Lord gives us all that he gives us. We should even be thankful for the trials that are put in our way because it brings us closer to him. And of course, Thanksgiving for us, uniquely American. I know other countries have Thanksgiving days, but that's not what we're celebrating. We're celebrating pure American Thanksgiving, giving thanks unto the Lord our God.
Deal with it.
And Thanksgiving also combines another one of my favorite things, the highest form of art, which is quaint paintings of turkeys. You know, like old livestock advertisement turkey paintings, or if you want to be a little fancier, a Ray Harm turkey print, just on the mantelpiece.
Which I'm sure we'll be using for the episode picture.
We will do our best to find the right one. You got to find the right turkey. This is where I bore you with the fact that everyone knows, like you don't know it, that Ben Franklin wanted the American bird to be a turkey and not a scavenger like the eagle. You knew this.
I knew this, yeah.
Everybody knows this, but it's one of those things that gets trotted out every year.
Well, because, I mean, the turkey is uniquely American, too, so.
Right. He's a noble bird. Noble bird.
And tasty bird.
He is tasty, but I do still think ham is superior. I know that's haram, but you know, it is what it is. Plus, it's more in the way of the gospel to eat ham, you know, or Christian liberty and all that. I know you like that kind of talk, Zelwyn.
I'm not sure if we should continue this podcast.
Podcast is done. But we've chosen today as our text to talk about the Old Testament reading for harvest observance. Right, Zelwyn?
Correct. I mean, you could certainly use the propers for, you know, Thanksgiving, or a day of Thanksgiving, I believe as it's called in LSB. But I think it's equally appropriate to use the propers for harvest observance, because, I mean, what is Thanksgiving in its essence but a Thanksgiving for the fruits of the earth, right?
Sure. Yeah,
I mean, do you want to contend with me on that, or
no, I don't at all. And you know, harvest observances, I don't know how common it is anymore. I once served in a parish where it wasn't really a harvest observance that they did, but rogate was always like a blessing of seeds and soil and things like that. And there apparently is some kind of historic precedent for planting and rogate, which I find rather interesting. But that's spring's episode. You know, your harvest is well past completed, right? Up your way?
Depends. Many things are completed, but there are still some things that aren't and won't be for a little bit yet. Sunflowers, notably.
Oh, of course, I forget about the sunflowers up there.
It's not uncommon for sunflowers to be harvested in even like late November, December in this part of the world, because they have to get totally dried out. So.
Now, remind me, Biggs is your preferred sunflower brand, correct?
It's pretty good, yeah.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I don't know if I'm super partial to any one kind of brand. We do have the North Dakota brand up here, which is pretty good. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but yeah, seeds are extremely wholesome, and you need to get more of them.
Right. Not to be confused with seed oils, which are unwholesome and you should get less of them.
Go with the original, not the
right. Exactly.
kind.
And listen, if you can't find a good sunflower seed, by all means, just chew tobacco. This podcast is brought to you by Red Man Chewing Tobacco, which I don't know if I've told this on the podcast before, but I was back home for a funeral a few weeks back, and the little cigarette/liquor store in my hometown has inexplicably one of the best bourbon selections I've ever seen, but the single greatest chewing tobacco selection I've ever seen in a store. And I was looking for a pouch of Red Man, and that's when they informed me. They said, I ain't got no Red Man. They don't make it no more. I said, why? And they said, well, it's America's best now. So you can't get Red Man chewing tobacco. And I said, why, Emmy? And she said, you know why. And she's right. I know exactly why. They take everything from the Red Man. Red Man can't have anything. So you can't get Red Man anymore. What's Grill's going to chew? I don't know. Levi Garrett, I guess. Mail pouch or something. But kids, stay away from mouth tobacco. It's a filthy habit, but it will keep you awake and keep your mouth hydrated. I have to endorse that after the temperance episode. When is chewing tobacco going to come back, though, Zelwyn? That's what I'm asking.
I don't know, man.
Nobody. Listen, my big tobacco support is going to lose us a lot of sponsorship dollars. I realize, but
yeah, all those mega bucks that we make off the podcast,
right? Because that's what it's about. Now watch America's Best reach out.
Oh, man.
Anyway, sorry, enough tobacco posting. Where were we? Yes, harvest observance. So, which tobacco is a traditional American crop as well. Need to note it here. Anyway, so so you're growing sunflowers up there. There's still a few things in the fields here. You see cotton around and stuff like that. A little further south, a little further north. Although I am told that this year and the next year, soybeans are going to largely take over cotton for some weather-related reasons or something. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, it's always good to observe this. In a lot of our agricultural episodes, we talk about this a bit, where getting in touch with the soil, for lack of a better way to phrase it, working with the earth reminds you of just how precious what we receive from the Lord is, knowing where your food is coming from. And this would apply to livestock too. And as you're working with that, and as you're paying attention to what you're doing, you're more cognizant of the fact that God is providing this and that it can be taken away very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
well, like growing up, raising cattle, Zelwyn, like you did you ever have anything that just like harmed the cattle in mass, or were you aware of that? Was that something on the radar? Like, hey, we got to do this, or it could all be gone. I mean, other than like people cutting the fence or something like that.
I mean, are you talking like the chupacabra here, or what?
No. See, I knew it would happen. No, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it sounds like I'm talking about crop circles or something, but no, I don't know. It's just like, something can come through, or, breech birth, something like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's always risk involved, especially because most of the time in this part of the world, guys try to time their calves being born fairly early in the year so that they're a good size by the time they get to selling time in the fall. But that usually means that they're being born during the winter. And
right.
That's always a risk, because sometimes you have a blizzard that comes in and you'll lose some calves. And of course, when you lose calves, you're losing part of your income. But I don't know if we've ever had anything where like the whole herd was lost, but of course, that's always a possibility, right?
Right. I mean, that's the thing, like a weather-related thing that we know that comes from the hand of the Lord or DARPA. But, it's kind of funny. Slowly, word fitly spoken just turned into two old dudes sitting at Hardee's talking. All right. Anyway, but let's talk a little bit then about harvest observance, the Old Testament reading, Deuteronomy, and then we'll do some more Thanksgiving posting in the midst of that. Zelwyn, where are we beginning?
So the Old Testament reading for harvest observance is Deuteronomy chapter 26, specifically verses 1 through 11. This is Moses talking about first fruits and basically the rite that goes along with presenting those first fruits to the Lord. I think it's extremely helpful because it presents to us different aspects of what it means to give thanks, things that we see very clearly. So I guess, first of all, just to set the scene, of course, the book of Deuteronomy itself is Moses giving his final sermon, his kind of farewell sermon to Israel just before they're about to enter into the promised land. And so part of what chapter 26 is doing is preparing them for what they are about to receive, as well as showing them what it means to live as Israelites, live as God's people in the land that they're just about to go into. Do you want to add anything to that, Willie?
No, I think it's good. Any of the final Moses stuff too, I always find very poignant.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about sort of where it comes in the history of the story, but he's still thankful to the Lord for all of these things, despite what is about to happen.
Right.
But it is the story. The story of the church is very much pictured in the life of Moses and the Israelites wandering through the wilderness, inching ever toward that promised land. And so here we are in the midst of this. We are wandering through the wilderness right now, awaiting either our blessed death or the coming of our Savior. Buffeted like the Hebrews are, and often grumbling like the Hebrews were. And so there's much that we can see here. But being thankful in the midst of everything that comes, and then, I mean, you all, I'm presuming, but most of you know the story, of the Israelites grumbling in the wilderness. I keep calling them Israelites. They're not quite there yet, but the Hebrews in the wilderness. and how they grumbled, and yet this kind of cycle of grumbling, repentance, and reminders toward thankfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. And then with this too, it's looking towards the blessings that they are about to receive. And it's also a way of reminding them that they are receiving these things by grace.
Right.
I think that's a fair way of terming it, because, they are the whole point of Deuteronomy 26 is to show them that everything that they are receiving has come from the Lord's hand.
Right. And I do enjoy that. And I believe it's immediately the next chapter that pronounces just multitude of curses that all the people say amen, amen to.
That part of the law that Paul refers to when he talks about the curse of the law. Yeah, it starts in the next chapter. It does start with the blessings, though, so we can give it that.
But I'm just saying, I'm going to bring anathemas into the liturgy.
We should bring them back. You know what I mean?
Bring them back. I think in the East they still have that, don't they?
We might need to bring back the old triptychs or whatever they were that they put all the names on for praying for.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And if you were stricken from it, then they wouldn't pray for you anymore.
Right. We do that just with the prayer list in the bulletin.
But so what we're looking at in chapter 26 then is the end of the beginning of the harvest, during the time of harvest, and bringing some of the first fruits that they have received as an offering to the Lord. And Moses tells them specifically how they should go about doing that. Saying like, you take some of the fruit of the ground, put it in a basket, go to the place where the Lord will choose to make his name dwell there. This is in verse 2. And basically to bring some of the harvest itself as an offering, as a sacrifice to the Lord, as a way of giving thanks for what they had received. That's the first step that we see here. And I think that's very helpful for us too, because because I will say this, it is a helpful way to give thanks even today. I don't think there's anything wrong with giving some of what you have received to the Lord, whether that's money or whatever it may be, right? Or am I just being too Old Testament here, Willie?
Well, you're being just too Old Testament. A lot of people don't realize that he's recording this while wearing a prayer shawl, and he blows the shofar in between breaks.
You take that back.
It's not true. It's not true. He does the opposite of whatever that is. He's actually wearing a tractor pull T-shirt.
It was just what I grabbed this morning. So, but I think what's helpful for us though is that in the New Testament, of course, that because we have become spiritual priests, all Christians are priests, all Christians are Levites, to use the language of the Old Testament. For that reason, the sacrifices that we give most of the time are spiritual sacrifices. Things like
praise
prayer,
and thanksgiving.
Yeah, praise, prayer, thanksgiving, that sort of thing. So that's very much a part of it too. But I don't think that they're mutually exclusive of each other.
No, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit later in the podcast, about tithes, offerings, that sort of thing, how that is metered out today. And it won't be a stewardship episode, I promise. I don't believe in stewardship sermons and stewardship series, so I probably won't do stewardship episodes. So stewardship sermon series, I should say. That that's become one of those things like in some churches you just sort of have to do every year. And I don't believe you need to shake the tree every year. That's all I'm saying.
But shaking the sugar tree might be something else.
Indeed. We'll be right back with more Word Fitly Spoken right after this. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to A Word Fitly Spoken. I'm Willie Grills here with Zelwyn Heide, and we're talking about Thanksgiving, thankfulness, and Deuteronomy 26. Well, Zelwyn, let's talk a little bit more about first fruits and what that means for us Christians.
Yeah, the first fruits, I would say, is not just the first, in the sense of like the first thing that comes out of the ground, but it is also frequently in the Old Testament the best of something. So it is the best of the harvest, the best of the animals, the best of whatever it is that you have. And I think that that's important because giving first fruits, giving this back to the Lord is not just an afterthought when it comes to Thanksgiving. Like, oh, I didn't have any use for this anyway, and so I'll give it to God. God actually criticizes Israel at many points for this exact kind of behavior, notably in like Malachi and stuff like that, robbing God and all that.
Right.
But I think it's important to keep in mind when we are giving back to the Lord, we are not doing it begrudgingly. We're not doing it just as, like I say, as an afterthought, but it is the best of what we have, right?
Right. And, a lot of churches want to put a percentage on that because nowadays it translates into net, income. So
Right.
money. But the biblical principle, because they're operating in a different economy. I mean, they do have money, but they have currency. But it's like you grow 10 potatoes, you bring 1 potato.
Right.
It's that kind of 10% sort of attitude, which I know is in a different text. But I'm not convinced that you can make just from the Bible a case that Christians have to give 10%. Ironically, you could make an easier case that they should give more. But the principle of first fruits, I believe, is still there. That you're giving, you think of the church, you think of God first when you're writing those checks.
Right. Right. So that when you give your potatoes or whatever it may be, you give them to the Lord, and of course, then they become. In the Old Testament, of course, then it was the food for the priests. That was part of what that was all about. But the point is that by giving the best of something, by giving the first fruits in this way, Israel is not just doing it as an afterthought. It
Correct.
is, like you said, keeping God first, keeping him first and foremost in our thoughts as we give back to him.
Right. And it's, of course, important to remember that God doesn't need anything. He's teaching us the sacrificial way for our own benefit, for our own sanctification, if you will.
More than just if you will. I mean, it is.
Yeah. I mean, God doesn't need your cattle. God doesn't need your 16 cans of pumpkin pie mix you're going to be stuck with and give to the food pantry after this week. But nevertheless, well, then that does kind of, you do mention like you're supposed to give of your best or give off the top. And not just give just because you have extra. If you do have extra, you should give it. We're not saying that's a bad thing, but I do see the fruits of this a little bit, like with the not our food pantry per se, because our donors are excellent and ours operates a little bit differently, and our school kids are actually quite good about giving to it as well. So we do not see this as our food pantry. Disclaimer. But you see this at food drives sometimes and stuff where people are giving what they clearly didn't want in their pantry. Garbanzo beans and
15 cans of kidney beans and pineapple.
Right. Those mandarin oranges. Actually, those are pretty good, but you forget about them, and then it's that kind of gathering dust in the back. Oh, I'll give this away.
And it's one of those things, like you say. I mean, they mean well, but it's just almost an afterthought. Whereas this kind of first fruits giving would be not just giving the canned goods or whatever, but like actually giving some of the best of what you have, like buying specifically to give in this way. If we want to translate it into our terms, like
Yes.
to buy those the good canned goods and to give those instead of just whatever you have left in your pantry.
Well, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right?
Right.
And that's something to think about. Said some guy. And here's the thing, too. When you're giving of the best, you might also be entertaining angels unaware. And, of course, the Lord in heaven sees what we're doing. And whatever you do to the least of these, there's all kinds of things that we could be doing, or good that we could be doing that we don't realize. But anyway, back to the first fruits thing.
Doing and not letting your left hand know what your right is doing, all that.
Yes, yes.
receiving your reward, your Father who sees in secret. I mean, it's almost like this is a big part of the Bible.
Yeah, it's almost like God's expecting something here. It's at this point somebody will go, what do you like, the Mormons? Are you checking W-2s? No. Although I think that actually is something in some of these big box churches. Like they will sit you down in a new membership class and essentially go over your W-2 or want to see your income and tell you what you should be giving. I mean, that moves a bit into too much legalism. The Lord loves a cheerful giver. So you should be gladly giving of these first fruits. We shouldn't have to extort you for them. And that's kind of what that is. I'm not going to sit down with the guy and go, hey, I notice you're not. I mean, somebody could make the argument I could. I know in former times, our churches used to post the giving records of everyone publicly once a year.
The scandal sheets.
Yes. I mean, I know you still do that, but.
No, I don't think we've done that for many years, but it's also just one of these things that, when we're thinking about what it means to give, we don't want to, like you say, we don't want to do it we don't want to do it begrudgingly. And I think that's where like the checking the W-2 kind of thing can fall into, because then it becomes a matter of like, oh, you need to do this. And it becomes more of a burden than anything.
Right.
I really do think that if we are going to give and to give the first of what we have, we should do so out of our free will, right? I mean, kind of like with Israel bringing contributions for the tabernacle. They brought so much that they actually had to tell them to stop.
Right.
That's what it should be.
Well, where to next, Zelwyn?
Well, I think part of giving first fruits is also remembering what we have been given, which is the second main part of this this chapter. And this is specifically like when starting in verse 5, where God gives them a kind of, I don't know, do you want to call this a creed? What do you want to call this?
Statement of faith? No. Yeah, I think a creed's good.
He says, a wandering Aramean was my father, and he went down into Egypt and sojourned there, few in number. And there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. And then that keeps going on past verse 5. But the point being that giving thanks is not just about what Israel received in the past year. Giving thanks is about everything that God has done, beginning with the wandering Aramean, which I would argue is Abraham.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and recounting all the mighty deeds of the Lord, a reminder of what he's done for us. And actually, even more than a creed, what you actually see happening here, Zelwyn, is the formation of a liturgical calendar.
Right.
And a liturgical service. It's in the Bible right there.
I won't argue with you. I think it's true. Yeah. I would even call Deuteronomy 26 an Old Testament Thanksgiving. So
sure, there you go. I don't know. You said that, and then the Waltons theme started like playing in my ear.
So it's not just a pilgrim thing. This is an Israel thing,
right?
So there,
just with no turkeys.
Exactly. The fullness had not yet come. Right. This was the type. This was the antitype.
The quail was pointing toward the turkey that would come. And in a way, that's what Emmaus is all about.
But where do you want to go with this, Willie? I mean, what do you want to talk about specifically with the wandering Aramean and all that?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here. I guess first I have to, the obligatory, hey, what's this sojourner talk about? and what is a sojourner?
A sojourner is for the lack of a better way of putting it, a resident alien. Someone
there you go. Yeah.
Someone who is living among Israel, who is participating in some degree in the life of Israel, but who is ultimately an outsider.
Right. And so this is obviously the case for open borders. And my melting pot, right?
No.
The Bible does right. The Bible tells us that we should be good to the sojourner and the stranger. And that's the principle of hospitality that kind of girds a lot of the Bible. And that's true. We would all agree. But every time this comes up in a text or it takes off on Twitter or something, or we have to talk about citizenship or race or just the concept of borders, they always point to the sojourner being among them as if that means that, one, you have to open your doors to everyone as far as your country goes, and that's just not the case. I mean, they're going to go into the promised land and have to conquer the promised land precisely so they can settle the borders. The sojourner is not held to the same legal standard as the Jew will be, but they still have to live within the Mosaic law to a degree, and certainly the moral law.
Well, if I remember correctly, the Passover is bound upon the sojourner.
Correct. But
So,
he is bound to observe it when he's in the land. That is true.
so I mean that in itself says something. It's not that they are just living among them and doing whatever. They are expected, at least in some degree, to live like Israel.
Correct. And I think that flies in the face of kind of a melting pot view, that the stranger does not come in and then dilute the culture that the Lord has laid down, that they are expected to assimilate to a greater degree than what we would. There's not an amalgamation. Right. Now, when there is a mixing of cultures in the Scripture, that's generally condemned because it's seen to have a corrupting influence.
Or it's seen as a judgment.
Or a judgment, yeah. Kind of being conquered by foreign people, too. My whole point is to say that they are expected to assimilate, but the people of God are also to be hospitable to them. But they don't compromise with them, which I think is an important point. But kind of cultivating this idea of thankfulness, they're able to not oppress the orphan and the widow. They're able to not oppress the sojourner precisely because they recognize everything comes from God. We are to be good stewards of it. And in Thanksgiving, we can give away to the stranger or the sojourner and not worry about lack.
Right. Well, and also because they were once sojourners themselves.
Correct. And again, to kind of go back to that, and what are we as Christians today?
Right. I mean, we are looking for a heavenly fatherland. We are sojourners in the midst of this world. I get
you, the
that.
land, I'm longing for you, and someday on thee I'll stand.
Beautiful.
This is now a Southern Gospel podcast.
I mean, why isn't it already? But,
right.
But I mean, it's one of those things where part of the remembering what they were, remembering that they were once wandering, that they once were homeless, that they were sojourners in a land that was not theirs, that they were oppressed there, that they were delivered from it. All of these things they should bring to mind as they bring the first fruits of the ground, because all of that has led up to this moment for them.
Correct.
And so it's looking
kind
back
of the great,
on all of it.
The great tragedy of it is that they will get the land and lose the land, get it back, lose it, and then, of course, lose it for the final time in the rejecting of the Savior, Jesus Christ.
Right.
Apologies to the dispensationalists listening.
Well, it's just one of those. Yeah, I mean, the reality of what Israel would become is one thing, but this is kind of the ideal, and I recognize that we also have an ideal when it comes to giving and stuff like that doesn't always meet up to reality. I mean, we are still sinners, but
correct. Is there anything else in that immediate section you want to talk about there? We're kind of in verses 5 through 11 here.
Yeah, I think the best way to translate this into our terms is that when we give thanks, when we specifically sit down and say, like, this is what we are thankful for. Thank you, Lord, for this, 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 and this. We should not limit ourselves to just what has happened in the past year, especially because when a year is more difficult than another, like we haven't received all that much, we might be tempted to say, oh, well, what is there to give thanks for?
Yeah, this year was a bust. Right. Something like that.
But then when we stop and we think, what has God done for us? He has given us the Savior. He has given us Christian ancestors. He has given us the land in which we live, and especially for like around here, I mean, that often means, land that our fathers had, that, that we now have and that someday will be handed on to our children. We can give thanks for a good harvest. We can give thanks for good health. We can give thanks for the family that we have. All of these things should come to mind when we give thanks to the Lord. And I think that's helpful to bring it.
Is it appropriate to give thanks for the crosses and the tribulations that you've suffered?
Absolutely, they are.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as counterintuitive as that sounds, it is entirely biblical, because it is through those crosses that God brings us to himself. And I don't mean this in kind of the way that it gets abused often, with the
theology of the cross, theology of glory, the biggest. No, I'll just get myself in trouble if I start talking about things that we think that are in the confessions that aren't, things we think that are grand overarching themes in Luther or Lutheranism that just aren't. I don't know what happened in the 20th century, but Lutheranism went off the skids, and it wasn't just Simonex.
I think it started with the death of Wham, but that's
it did. Speaking of judgments upon a nation.
No, it's important for us to keep these things in mind. Yes. And we can do that in very concrete ways that I think are helpful to us. So
Right. Also, we missed a very important note that Deuteronomy 26 is the sedes doctrina for the offering plate.
With the basket?
You're supposed to gather. It specifically mentions a basket more than once. It's like you'll put it in a basket. The priest will take the basket. Okay, we get it. You need the Lord prescribed a basket.
Specifically. And then, and the basket even gets set down in front of the altar. I mean, maybe you need to start putting the offering plate in front of the altar, Willie.
Yeah, right. Well, I like the custom of some churches. It is a historic custom, like at Easter to have the foods blessed, and they all bring that, And
sure.
You used to see food blessings associated with Thanksgiving services as well in other denominations. I'm not saying put a big cornucopia on the altar, per se. That might be pagan, I don't know. But we've Christianized it. We're good. Yeah, but bringing those first fruits, bringing those things in to have them blessed and prayed over, that's kind of wholesome.
Yeah. I wonder, was that ever a thing in your church, or was that something, like you said, just in other denominations?
The bringing the foods to be blessed? The
food blessings, yeah.
That is, if I'm not mistaken, that's Easter in the churches of the East. And then I have seen similar done in, I'm going to say evangelical churches, but I mean it in a good way. It's not so much that they're having they don't bring the actual foods they're going to eat to be blessed, but they sort of like symbolically bring something in, jar of seeds, something like that.
Kind of like the Rogate thing.
Yeah. And, that sort of thing. I mean, I guess you can sort of see remnants of that and maybe blessings of quilts or blessings of backpacks or that sort of thing, maybe. I don't know. I can see the gears are turning in your head. Now you're trying to figure out how to do the blessing of food at your church now.
Well, I mean, if it could be done and done reverently, I think it could be a very good thing, because it is a nice way of reminding of what, the Lord has given to us. And that would include the food that is about to grow, or the food that we have received, or,
this is why I'm very pro blessing. I'll bless anything. You bring it to me, I'm going to bless it. Because it does remind us of where it comes from, and we are asking the Lord to bless whatever the X item is, and he will do it according to his will.
Are you blessing rings and that sort of thing too?
Well, we do have a general rite of blessing, so why not?
I suppose.
There's a rite for blessing of a cross, blessing of a bell. One day I'll get to use a blessing of a bell. I can feel it. We're this close. We are at our next break. We'll be right back with more Word Fitly Spoken right after this. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to A Word Fitly Spoken. We're talking Deuteronomy 26 and Thanksgiving. Well, Zelwyn, we've come to our third segment here, so where are we going now?
Well, I think the third and the last thing that Deuteronomy 26 talks about when it comes to Thanksgiving is that it also means doing good for those, especially those in need. So, but to put it in our terms, that Thanksgiving also includes good works. And I realize that everybody is reeing right now over that, but
Well, yeah. So Deuteronomy 26 is actually just another example of faith working through love. And you can't get mad at that just because the Roman Catholics use it. The Bible actually says it. And that thankfulness, gratitude, and hospitality, whatever we're going to say here, loving your neighbor, all go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. And specifically in this passage, what that looked like is using what they had been given to take some of the harvest, to take some of the produce of the land, and to give it to the Levite, to give it to the sojourner, to give it to the fatherless, the widow, so that they would also have something. So in other words, to give some of what they had received to those who had nothing, right?
Correct.
Because the Levite didn't have anything because they didn't have a land possession. The Lord was their inheritance. Right. The sojourner is just a stranger anyway. And the fatherless and the widow have no one to provide for them. So they are destitute. They don't really have anything going for them. So to give some of what you have to them is part of what it means to give thanks.
And the Lord actually is very concerned about the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm using the poor to encompass all those that you said, the people who don't have. I mean, that's poor at its most fundamental definition. It's not just all my bootstraps and stuff like that you will always have the poor, Jesus says. Mm-hmm. And the principle is true. If a man won't work, let him not eat. Of course, St. Paul is correct when he says that. But there are people who I know and you know, and we all know, who work very hard and still don't have enough food or don't have adequate shelter or adequate clothing. And the Lord calls us all to provide for our brothers in need who have those needs. I think it's a good thing for us to practice this kind of giving and to also be where those people are. And I don't mean so that people can see us working at the soup kitchen, but to actually see the faces of the people that you are helping is a good thing, because you can actually know them as human beings. And again, it's one of these things where for a lot of people, it's a lot easier to send things overseas or send the focus overseas, something we harp on a lot here at Word Fitly. To see the poor in your neighborhood or the hungry in your neighborhood or in your congregations, those in the household of faith, I think really brings the point home and makes it easier to do or harder to do, depending on which angle you're coming at it from.
Right. Yeah, and especially, to have that face-to-face connection, to actually know who you are giving to, you'll also know a lot better what they actually need. Because again, there's nothing wrong with food pantries and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with giving aid to people that you'll never meet. There's certainly something good and wholesome about that. But too often it becomes like, okay, I'm going to give this generic gift of clothing or this generic gift of food and hope that it will meet somebody's needs somewhere. Whereas if I know this person in particular, like let's say they don't have a coat, I will give them a coat.
Yes.
Because that's what they need. And I think there's something very wholesome about that.
Well, need we remind you the story of Winnikin's yellow pants?
Right. Well, you better tell it again, just in case.
Well, Cliff's Notes version is, Pastor Winnikin was known for being very charitable, almost to a fault. His wife, knew that he was giving everything away, like he would give his boots away and everything. Well, he had these horribly ugly yellow, I guess they were deerskin breeches made.
Sure.
Precisely because he was giving everything away. And I forget the story of why he had them made that way, or with that, somebody probably gave him the cloth or something like that. But our man gave away so much that he had to wear these comically ugly pants.
Well, is this where we bring in Martin of Tours and all that too?
Yes, but I think that's a very good one. Would you like to tell the story of Martin and his cloak?
I don't remember all of it. You might have to fill it in.
So Saint Martin of Tours is a soldier, and he is heading into the city, and the city gates close at night. So he has to sleep outside the gates, and so he It's cold. He sees a poor man who doesn't have anything, and so he tears his cloak in two and gives half of the cloak to the man, and who doesn't have anything. And then, if I get the details of the story correct, because there's a couple different versions, but in a dream, it's revealed that that man that he helped was Jesus, and then Martin's cloak was mended and fixed. Did I get all the details right?
I think so.
Enough of
Yeah.
them. The point was, in his charity, Martin actually served Jesus, and all was made well through his sacrifice there. So, true story, actually happened.
Yeah, I'm on board.
Yeah, you all have to realize there is an unseen world and that these things do happen. My admonishment to the audience is, I mean, of course, take everything with a grain of salt, but maybe the reason why you don't see these great workings of the saints today is because you don't believe them and don't have eyes to see.
There's the third segment fire that we were looking for.
Right.
But I mean, we see.
And by the way, hold on, I got to stop because somebody's going to correct me. I know it's pronounced Tor, but I'm an Anglo. If there's an S there, I'm going to say it. Just want to. So don't write me a letter.
But I mean, with the saints, using them as examples, we see this kind of charity. We see this kind of giving to the point of making themselves even destitute, which I think is an extremely helpful thing to consider. But it's always done, like we were saying originally, with specific needs in mind. Like, Martin gave half of his cloak to that beggar because that's what he needed, right? He didn't just give us something and say, okay, you go take care of this for me. That's not what made it so great. And I do think that, especially when we think in terms of like charity and stuff like that, again, these things are helpful. These things are good. I'm not saying stop giving charity, but let's start at home. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the people that we know.
Right. And start with the household of faith.
Yeah.
There's no reason in our churches that we should have any member who is hungry outside of extreme circumstances, like a famine or something like that.
Right.
Begin with that. Take care of your own, and then take care of your own communities first. And of course, take care of those who are far off, but don't neglect the people who are near. It just continually amazes me how hard it is to, to get people, not laymen, but to get the higher up types, I guess we'll say, to get a certain type of church worker excited for local work among, I don't know, let's say poor Southern whites or something like that.
Right.
Or, poor Northern whites, I guess we'll say, or oil field workers or whatever. Put whatever spin you want on yours.
Right. It is what it is, unfortunately. But even if we can't fix the higher ups, we can at least do what is right.
Right.
And to take care of the household of faith. And I really do think that if we were to do more of that, to really consider like who in our congregation needs food, who in our congregation needs clothing, who in our congregation is hurting this month, even with paying their bills or something like that. And I know that, some people get a little proud about that. They don't want to take that kind of help. And I get it.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's okay to let Christians be Christians to you.
Yeah. And I would say if you're listening to this and you're in the position where you need help, don't be so proud that you won't receive it, because that's the hand of the Lord reaching out to you to provide for you.
Right.
Don't be lazy, of course, but don't be so prideful that you won't let the Lord's servants help you. Don't go hungry when you don't have to.
So to apply this to you, Willie, then you should just accept what the LWML ladies are giving you for Thanksgiving.
That's always, but they're awesome. My ladies are awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean it's all connected, because when we take care of those around us, when we do the good works that serve our neighbor, that sort of thing, it is also giving thanks to God.
Yes.
Because we are taking what we have received and we are using it in the service of one another.
Absolutely.
And what greater thanks could there be?
Yeah, it's ironic how one of the most temporary things we can give, like food or shelter or clothing, those types of acts are actually storing up treasure in heaven.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it too. Even in Deuteronomy 26, even the bringing of the first fruits is itself helping someone else because it was the food that was given to the priests, right? You were helping the Levites and the priests and giving them their daily bread by
Yeah.
giving, to the Lord what he had given to
Well,
you.
and I think it's worth us pointing out that you and I are pastors, Zelwyn, and that's our full time gig, and we actually are dependent upon the generosity and charity of our members.
Hmm.
We are the Levites. I mean, we are the priestly class, and after a
I know what
fashion,
you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean.
and so we do live off of their generosity, and we should be grateful for that. I mean, that's a humbling thing that our people would be so grateful to what the Lord has done and be so mindful that the church is necessary, the meeting house is necessary, the clergy are necessary, that they are going to give from their first fruits to make sure that the church doesn't close its doors or that the Lord's
Especially,
workers are taken care of. I mean, the New Testament tells them to do that as well. That helps.
and I mean, and people want to do that. I
They
mean,
want to do it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the humbling thing. It's not like we're trying to wring it out of them with a series on why they should be giving us more or something like that. This is a case of like they see the need and they provide.
Right. And I
And
know that there are people who have horror stories, about congregations not giving or whatever. But that's really not been my experience in the majority of cases that I've seen, and certainly not been my experience in what I've been involved with personally.
right.
But there are those outliers out there. But in the main, excuse me, Christians want to give, and they cheerfully give to the church.
And if nothing else, I think it may be a case of maybe they just need to know how to give.
Sure.
Maybe they need to see the need. Maybe some of the woes that we have are not seeing the needs that are there.
You don't receive because you do not ask, kind of thing.
Yeah,
You don't
kind
receive
of.
because you didn't point it out to them. Kind of flip that in its head a little bit.
Well, because
And too, there needs to be general giving, but sometimes it is easier to get people to give when there's a specific need there. People like to give toward that. I don't think we should put name plaques on everything, but that's a subject for another episode.
well, I mean, like let's say like there's a building project, like the roof needs to be
Correct.
replaced, and you have
Correct.
a drive to raise funds for that. People do give to that. Yeah, it takes a while, but they see the need and they'll fill it, kind of a thing. So it maybe in terms of meeting the needs of the congregation without being obnoxious about it or intrusive, I suppose. I mean, you don't want to make anybody uncomfortable about it, but just say like, hey, there is this need within our congregation. Can we meet it? Whether that be food or clothing or whatever it may be. We can direct charity in that way, so that we take care of our own.
And again, it's all going to be really parish dependent because it's everybody has their own crosses, everybody has their own needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I mean, here's an example. You've probably got some elderly people that could use their driveway shoveled.
Right.
The people could help out with something like that, where that's not really a need here. I don't have to dust the snow shovel off that much. So it's going to look different. And unfortunately here it's going to be raking leaves. My least favorite thing in the world to do. Why do we do it? I don't know. It's the most biodegradable thing in the world, and I'm not supposed to be able to leave it on my lawn for some reason. You can actually burn leaves in town here, by the way, Zelwyn. So that this time of the year it looks like some kind of smoldering hellscape when you drive through the neighborhood. It's just smoky.
Just set your lawn on fire. That's what you need to do, Willie.
That's what they're asking me to do. The city ordinance said so.
I mean, it's like, or take, for example, is there someone in the congregation who can't get to church?
Yes.
Because they're elderly or something. Go get them.
And we have a couple members here who are very good at that, and I won't name them for, so that they don't lose their reward in heaven. But it always is very humbling and very wholesome and very encouraging and inspiring when you see that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
My favorite story from here, and I've told them about them before, are the Prang brothers, two bachelor farmers or two bachelor brothers who never married. Being redundant here, but anyway, and they would they would actually go and pick up neighborhood kids and make sure they got to Sunday school and church, made sure they got to VBS. They'd put them in like a cattle trailer and drive them. Very wholesome. Predated the church bus by a lot, but.
And the cattle trailer, that's a new one, but I like it. Don't get me wrong. But that's a new one.
Well, yeah, and church vans were a big thing for a while. We actually lost our church vans in due to arson, but that's neither here nor there. But no, but like you say, I'm getting out in the weeds here. But somebody needs a ride to church, go get them. And of course, if you bring them to church, please remember to take them home.
Right. And it doesn't just have to be family either, because I know people will do that for family. Of course, in my part of the world, everybody's family, but that's neither here nor there.
True.
Just to really to see the need and to do whatever needs to be done to fill it.
Right.
That is what we are. That is a crucial way of giving thanks to the Lord that we should do more of. I really think so.
And, use some discernment, step outside your comfort zone a bit, and you'll find yourself even more thankful and more grateful for what the Lord has done. That it's going to be weird and awkward to step out and to do some of these things, but it'll be better in the long run for you.
Right.
We're stepping right up to, if you give 10%, if you sow a seed of 100, the Lord will give you back 1,000-fold. We're not saying that. I can't promise that. But I can promise you the treasures stored up in heaven are greater than the riches of the world.
And that when we lay up treasures in heaven, that is something that, moth cannot break in. A thief will not steal.
Rust cannot destroy.
It is something that we should hold on to. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how central all of this is to the Bible.
Yeah.
To take care of those in need, to provide for the household of faith.
And there's so many encouragements to do it just because it's the right thing. And then there's the other encouragement that the Lord is watching. The angels are seeing you do this. Mm-hmm. All of this stuff, all these witnesses to what we're doing here. That's meant to encourage us, not to scare us. Not to say, oh, hey, am I doing enough? Oh, is an angel keeping a tally? No, the scriptures tell us these things to say, hey, they're watching you, they're rooting for you, they're glorifying God as you do these things. Because it is God who is at will and at work within you.
Yeah, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly.
Indeed. Well, Zelwyn, we got just about a minute left. Any final words for the audience? For the folks at home, we'll say? For the folks at home. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. I know it's always an excellent time of year. And if you're listening to this, before you go to church on Thanksgiving, go and give thanks to the Lord in that way. That's very much a crucial part of what it means to give thanks. Follow after what God would have us do. And in that way, we can remember everything that he has done and give thanks for it all. Because I really do think that is the spirit of Thanksgiving, one which we would do well to remember this day. What about you, Willie? Amen. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Enjoy the day. Be mindful of who we are giving thanks to whom we are giving thanks, rather. That will be the Lord. And be mindful of all that he has done for us. Be mindful of all he's given us, both the things of this world, the temporal things, and the eternal things. Well, this has been the Word Fitly Spoken. If you like what you heard and want to know more, check us out, wordfitlyspoken.org, facebook.com/wordfitly, or Twitter @wordfitly. I'm Willie Grills here with Zelwyn and Heide. God love you, and God bless. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Philippians 4.